Well, it's now time for an energizing flow of thoughts with some vehement personalities on a very familiar yet uncharted domain gaming. Gaming has evolved into a source of entertainment for people of all ages. The popularity of games among audiences who enjoy the adrenaline rush of competition has grown year after year. All of this creates opportunities to venture into this domain and transform it into an industry with innovative ideas and a business perspective.
Well, we're all set and packed for the discussion ahead. So let us begin the session. And for that, I would request the moderator, Mr. Umesh Kirplani, to kindly initiate the discussion.
These guys have given us a little insight as to what they think the gaming industry looks like, and everyone is repeating more or less the same things, that gaming is the future. Everyone knows that gaming has a lot of scope going forward, but then nobody knows exactly what is included in the gaming industry and how there are so many verticals. Like I myself, when I first entered this industry, I thought, oh, uh, it's so cool that people get to play games and they get paid for it. That was my perception.
Mm.
So just a little about myself. I started entering this industry somewhere in my 12th grade. Uh, and at that point, the only job that I knew was a competitive gamer. So I used to go around in cyber cafes looking for tournaments to compete in. Obviously, I won some, I lost some. In some tournaments, I got my behind handed to me. And then I just realized what the skill cap is and how much a person can be good at any particular game. Most of you guys must have heard of the games like PUBG and Counter Strike, the big ones, the most popular ones. And that was my entry experience into esports. But then esports is just one verticality of gaming. So before we get into this discussion, I would like to hear a little story from Mr. Rajat, because he is a game developer himself. And there's several aspects to the gaming industry. There's people who make the games, like developers. There's people like me and you who play it. There's people who invest into it, and there's a whole different perception that they have to offer. People like Mr. Sadiq Merchant, they represent a lot of investment firms. So even these guys, look for something or the other in a company before they invest into it. So I'm gonna go around the panel turn by turn. I'm gonna just ask everyone what their story is, how they started the company, what prompted them to start their company, and how they saw these opportunities. So I'm gonna start one by one. Mr. Rajat, I would like to start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how the story of Gametronics unfolded.
Sure. So I started playing games in 1989. Most of you guys were not even right. So I had my Atari at home, and I used to play on that. And that time itself, I kind of realized that that's what I'm going to do. And when I got my engineering, I made a game as my project instead of making some banking software or some other things what other people were making. And my inspirations were Doom and Epic's Jazz Jackrabbit. And I made a game called Sea Dogs, which was using a lot of Doom's assets. It was like a top-down game. IBM immediately picked me up right after that, and they had a very very small vertical within their company which was focusing on the media, and I became part of that. That was like probably the a four-member team traveling around the globe. So they took me to 67 different countries for solving tons of problem, and I worked closely with the Prince of Persia team back in those days,
Nice.
and then since 1995 till date, I'm making game. So my past, present, and future, everything is around games. I just probably, so I own 9 companies at the moment, and all these companies are actually different verticals of games or related businesses. Some focus on theme parks, some focus on games, some focus on serious gaming. So like, Rishabh, then we talked about like how games are going in different directions, and game technologies are being used, right? So if you see, one of the biggest thing happened is that live training of the physical training completely stopped because of the pandemic, and that's when people started understanding the need for something what we had been screaming out loud since 2012, that training can be done using a virtual reality, training can be done using game technologies, because you can literally touch and feel and do everything what doing in the real training. So yeah, so we have that business takes care of all the, and we have clients like SpiceJet, Emirates, and all these, Bosch and these guys there. So we started in 2012 actually in US. So I have been in US since 1997 to 2015. And enough of working for others, and making them their dreams realized. So we started working on our game, which larger team was in India. It was India's first PlayStation 3 game, which was released from India under Indian brand name called SNS. Reached worldwide top 10 charts on PSN back in those days.
Nice.
So again, PSN was not big. And then the journey continued. In 2017, we re-christened the company as Gametronics. And I moved back to India in 2015, late 2015, and since then I've been saying that game business basically is going to go, big. People should consider this as a serious business, and it's a legit business. Nazara's IPO proved that, though it's pretty small in terms of what the overall this thing is. Install base is great in India. So all the things are happening now. We probably were waiting for a pandemic to happen to realize the validation of game industry as a real legit industry. But the boom was witnessable for quite some time. Companies like Moonfrog, Offpro getting 15 million plus, from Sequoia funds and all those, and Bloom, investing in MacBook finally got acquired by Flipkart. So all those things. So this is my journey. We are more of passion-driven studio than absolutely install-based studio. Recently, we released the game just on this April 9th called Speedy Gun Savage. That game is already very big in arcades. More than 10,000 hours have been clocked. Now we release the consumer version of that, and we're already seeing pretty good number, more than any game so far. So for us, I'm replicating Doom, in VR in a way. So that is my focus. I make games which I feel like, not necessarily what business trends say, or the market trends say. Whatever I feel like, it's my expression of my creativity.
And boomer shooters are making a comeback, like Doom, Hex, and Heretic. All these games,
Absolutely.
all these games. I mean, people used to think of them as 90s games, but let's be honest, they are evergreen. So
Absolutely. We are actually adding heretics, that finding the gun mechanic, in this current game also. So again, my inspiration.
Lovely.
Totally.
But across all these years of experience, and because you started Gametronics all the way back in 2012, what are some of the challenges that you faced when starting this company?
Back in those days were really big, especially in India, because game was like, you never find the right kind of game programmers and game artists. Like our hiring rate was 700 to 1. We used to interview 700 people in order to get one right person. And as I told you that we don't bring people who will talk about the analytics to us and other things to us. Unity basic thing. We generally go down deeper into the DirectX and OpenGL kind of questions, and at the same time problem solving. And those were the real challenges in India back in those days. Now situation is a little better because people have started playing game. People are making some really decent indie games are out there, like in the Shadow. Recently I checked, Gurgaon based company, brilliant game. So those were resources in India was a big challenge. So, lucky that I was in US and my core team was there, and still there. Like my game designer, the level designer, the art director, all the day with 25 years experiences. So we struggled to get resident resources for those kind of things. So I think that was the biggest thing, and we were not focusing a lot on mobile. And so that was again another thing, because India was always a mobile first country, right? So people were so good at Unity and all those things while we were working on Unreal, and other engines and stuff. So we were facing a lot of issues. So, and those issues still persist. Just 700 has come down to 300.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the biggest challenge was finding the right talent to join your company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what do you look for in a person when you are looking to hire someone? If someone who has just graduated from a game designing course or a computer science course, what qualifications or non-academic qualifications do they need in order to be a part of your company?
And it's all different because there are like more than 200 different career options in game industry, right? this game industry alone. So, I'll tell you one anecdote here. The guy who's leading my biggest team of 70 people right now, as like the one of my art director, he's 10th pass actually. But he's so damn good with his art. He's an artist, and that now he's leading people from NITs and all the BFAs and other things. It's just basically the pure passion, knowledge about the games in general, where the game industry is headed to, not where it was, or what it's like, not the herd mentality. We were from one of the first one to play around and tinker around the MetaHuman and all those things, what Unreal recently released and stuff. So, so the thing is that and where we are going, so we released the event platform much before in 2015, which ICICI and Microsoft had been using since then. So this guy, and so that's for programmers generally we don't ask C++ kind of questions. Do I come and tell me about the object-oriented programming and stuff? Not no shit there. Simple problem-solving questions. How good you are logical. How good is your logical explanations for things, and understanding the deep into the system kind of thing. Do you even understand how the graphics pipeline and other things are working? And when we are talking about AI, basically we just throw some challenge and let people figure out everything. Being Indian, right? We face, we are by default gamers, right? The minute we step out of our house, we figure out which road to take. Unlike America, where you have to take Highway 105 and you'll straight away reach there. In India, we figure out this road will have less traffic. This will have Patla Gali and all those kind of things, and all those kind of things. We're always mind mapping, and that's precisely the role of the level designer and game designers put together. So we throw those kind of challenges and see how people actually react. In programming, definitely academic things are really, really big in our scheme of things, where we need to have right kind of people and stuff. So in total, all my companies together, we are close to 2,000 people. And so kind of, I think we found really, really good people from India, and especially the new breed of game design and designer. Earlier, the idea was that whoever had some sort of idea used to think he's a game designer. But now I think, with the changing times, people actually have a detail and a fair bit of idea about what game design is and what it involves. So, yeah.
All right. That's really fascinating. That also brings me to Mr. Kshitij over here. Mr. Kshitij also has been the founder of Pacific Gaming, and I would like to hear your story as well.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. If I really have to tell the story about how we came across starting Pacific Gaming, after what Rajat just said about a passionate approach to gaming, it's a little contrast to that because we saw gaming as one of the industries in India that is actually gonna start expanding and leaving a good mark in the industry and have that kind of potential wherein the business can actually be grown into one of the leading businesses in India, right? So when we looked at gaming, not in a very passionate approach, but when I'd say this very out loud because I want everybody else who is in this session also to know that, yes, you might not have the passion to go through and play a game, but it is always considered as a good business to be in, So you can probably look at it as a very, very good career option that's going to take you places and things like that. So yeah, since 2017, when Pacific Gaming's been active, we've had one single game. We are predominantly in the real money gaming sector. So we started off with poker. That in the initial days of 2017, we did a lot of market research as to what exactly the country needs in terms of a real money game. There is not much of innovation that can happen in the game itself because the game itself comes with a defined set of rules, but the experience of playing is what was a little different then to what it is today. So that is something that we decided to address with our first game, Focus Saint. And as and when we grow and we see the traction growing, uh, we developed another game in the Rummy space called Gully Rummy. And that's been running for the last 6-7 months now, and we're seeing a pretty decent increase in the number of people coming on board every day. So yeah, I mean, this has been the story of Pacific Gaming. And yeah, I hope it gets more pages in its chapter in the near future.
That's interesting. I mean, comparing what you and Rajat said, you did mention that there's a stark contrast, but I can't help but notice that Pacific Gaming stands on the border of gaming and gambling. So it's there. So you guys must have faced like a completely different set of obstacles than what Rajat did.
See, there, yes, the common intuition to a lot of things that involves money when you play against another person using money. Because right from our very college days or whatever, you know that when we used to go play cricket, it's always going to evolve into another team coming and saying, huh, let's play for 100 rupees or 200 rupees since the childhood days. Right? So yes, when money is involved, there is always a common intuition that comes in saying that yes, this is gambling, but please understand these are always opinions, and there is a court that is sitting in India that has particularly ruled what are skill games and what are not, and poker, rummy, and even fantasy have been clearly mentioned as a game of skill by the Supreme Court of India. And as far as I'm concerned, opinions can come, but the law of the land stands, and the law of the land says that this is not. So I generally don't encourage discussions in terms of gambling as such, because it is not at the end of the day, right? I mean, we can all have opinions, but the law of the land stands over there.
Okay. So what challenges did you guys face? Like, for example, Rajat had a completely different challenge where he had to hire a set of people who might not have the qualifications necessary on paper, but then they had a decent understanding of how the game engines work. I'm assuming problems like that are something which won't be faced by you. You must have a completely different set of problems, like how you said the game of skill is involved, and there's got to be some restrictions about the legality and the legislative of all these things. So when you were starting your company, what were some of the challenges that you guys faced?
See, the biggest challenge for us, being in the real money gaming phase, was acquiring customers itself, because there are very limited channels of advertising. Yes, recently with a lot of bigger celebrities endorsing the real money gaming brands, TV channels, not all though, but some of them have started opening up their airtime for getting ads placed over there. But the biggest challenge still comes in the digital media, wherein, for example, there are a lot of restrictions on Google, Facebook, or any of your social media related advertising opportunities. So yes, the biggest challenge that I generally faced was even related to talent, because when I had an interview and I would interview somebody in the sales or the marketing side, right, I would ask them, what would you do to get me more users? And the very typical answer that I always got was, yes, I'm going to go through social media, I'm going to do this, go through Google. But as soon as I tell them that no, this is not allowed, what else are you going to do? And they don't have an answer. So the creative thinking in terms of how do you get a brand across. I mean, the people in device industries like liquor or cigarettes have been doing this for a long time. I mean, there are always innovative marketing methods that you can come up with. But this is not something that a lot of people are exposed to today. So yeah, I mean, marketing avenues and ideas are something that is where we face our challenges.
All right. So it's more of trying to creatively get your product across and trying to get more users, rather than trying to find the right talent, rather than finding the right talent to join your company. Is that how I can sum it up? Is that a fair summary?
Yes, on a kind of very in a nutshell, yes, that's pretty much been the problem that has triggered us to it.
All right, all right. So now we've got two different kind of game developers over here, but I would like to take the opinion of Mr. Sadiq over here because he represents the money. He's a person who generally invests in gaming companies. What do you look for when you're entering a market like this? Because there's such a huge variety. There's the kind of gaming companies that makes the game, something like Rajat does, and these are games which you can actually play on a computer or in a VR headset. And then there are games which involve real money and not necessarily a video game, but poker and rummy games which have already existed since a long time. So with such a huge variety, how do you decide where do you want to get into it, and how do you decide which is the best investment option? Or I don't know, just walk us through your process.
Sure, sure. So like Rajat and Kshitij, I come from a slightly different background. I come from more of an VC investing background. Before answering a question, I'll give you like a quick introduction of what our fund does, and that'll help set some context as well. So I come from Lumikai Fund, which is India's first early stage gaming, interactive media, and entertainment focused VC. We are purely focused on these sectors because our team has strong experience in this space. So there were ex-entrepreneurs, ex-operators, and now they're investing. So they deeply understand the nuances of building gaming content companies, platforms over the past decades. And our team also has a lot of gaming enthusiasts, such as me, which has joined. So I was an avid gamer myself, grown up playing some really cool games across PC, console, mobile, and seen the gaming side from the consumer side. And now I'm very excited to be a part of an ecosystem and seeing what actually happens on the entire backend, right? So really exciting times. So coming back to our fund, we are a new fund. We just launched a few months back, but we've already started deploying capital. So we made two investments in two content companies, two gaming studios. I think one of the good parts for our fund is most of our investor base comprises of iconic global gaming and media companies, and most of them are household names from Japan, Finland, US, South Korea, and other countries. So I think giving our portfolio companies direct access to them, getting them the right talent, the right partnerships, the right publishing deals. So that's the kind of value add we provide to our portfolio companies. And that's typically why we are an early stage fund, because we can maximize the value when we come in so early, right? I think how we look at sectors is, like you mentioned, I think gaming has a lot of depth and breadth at this point in the market. And the market is huge, right? I mean, it's expected to grow from a $1.1 billion market to reach almost 4 billion in 3 years' time. India, I think, has a massive user base at the moment: 300 million online active gamers, 450 million smartphones, and the market is really huge in terms of in terms of the stats. If you see, and I think it has to do a lot with two things, right? Supply and demand, and we are seeing like constant influx in both of them. Gaming has become like the fastest growing segment in the entertainment industry at this point, and I think the key factors for that growth are two things, right? Demand as well as supply. So on the demand side, you're seeing a lot of cheaply available smartphones, better affordable internet, better payment options, younger demographics. Most of our gaming age group falls under the 30 age group category. And on the supply side, we're seeing a huge growth in the local game developers, primarily because of, I think, demand for localized content has increased in gaming. When I mean by localized content, I mean games which are deeply rooted in India's culture and are available in vernacular languages, which drives a lot of growth in tier 2, tier 3 markets. So we're seeing a lot of demand for that kind of content. A typical example for that would be something like a Ludo King and a Teen Patti. Second increase for supply would be, I think, the entire anti-China sentiment, right? Which is been going on for almost a year now, has created room for a lot of homegrown gaming studios to come up, which has increased traction from investors like us, to look at this industry very, very closely with a more specialized approach. And that has increased, basically provided capital and provided the right access for developers in the Indian region to focus on the game and to focus less on raising capital. How we look at the market, I think it's a very broad thing to look at. We broadly have like a huge thesis of things that we are very bullish on, and then we look at it, like we go backwards and we look at it and from that way. Uh, Gaming is a very, very attractive business, right, which has been on the consistently high growth over the past couple of years, especially in India, which has been on a consistent bull trajectory, right? Since the pandemic, the pandemic has proved to be a huge inflection point, and we have seen like a huge growth in downloads for gaming platforms, for gaming studios. On the investment side, it's attracted more than $500 million just over the last 1 year, and that investment itself is more than the investment which gaming companies have raised over the past 5 years, right? So we have seen a unicorn emerge in the sector, a soon-to-be unicorn in the sector. We've seen a lot of cross-border interest from gaming strategics abroad. So Moonfrog was just acquired by a Swedish company called Stillfront. We've seen homegrown IPOs happening now with Nazara. So this increased buzz has created a lot of interest for early stage entrepreneurs, early stage gaming entrepreneurs in the sector to raise venture capital. And it's become, you can say, a good way of raising capital for a business in the past couple of years. So I think I think we are roughly bullish on a few thesis points which we feel which is going to drive a lot of growth in India. So our entire team has studied the market for a few decades. We have a lot of investors, and we feel like these few thesis points is something which is going to drive growth in on the gaming side in the next 5 to 7 years. A few of them I can walk you through them. I think the first is social gaming. We feel like there is a very high openness, high degree of openness towards social multiplayer platforms. Indians are intrinsically very social, and I look at games as a way to connect with each other online. So you can have like an audio connection, video connection with people over games, and that's something we are very bullish on, right? The entire social gaming side of things. Secondly, we really like regional language gaming experiences. I think some of the interesting stats is like Tamil users, right? They're the fastest growing category of regional users playing PUBG, and that's something which is something which not a lot of people know. And 90% of all video consumption happens on YouTube in regional languages. So that's something, regional language users is the fastest growing category in India at this point. So we are looking at people who are targeting that specific region, that particular audience as well. I think we're also looking at games which are looking at new demographics. So the entire pandemic has unlocked newer demographics. So we're seeing a lot of female audiences, a lot of female gamers coming up, a lot of gamers who've not identified themselves as non-gamers, but have suddenly become gamers during the pandemic, and have started to like games. So we've seen that behavioral change happening over time. And games like Ludo King, Team Party has unlocked that audience by leveraging familiar mechanics, which is culturally rooted in India's in India, and are deeply connected with the Indian ecosystem. I think broadly we are more interested would be in original IP. We feel like Indian storytelling is now coming of age, and there's no better way of showing the Indian story but through games, right? So there's a massive opportunity to build original gaming experiences, which can then become transmedia IPs, and we are starting to seeing the beginning of that. It won't be long before we see a lot of Indian gaming companies, a lot of Indian gaming companies emerge from India for India and also for global as well. So we don't have a lot of Indian grossing titles in the App Store and the Play Store right now. But we will, that certainly is most likely going to change in the next couple of years.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. One thing that I noticed you talking about is how much you emphasized on the importance of regional languages and inclusion of tier 2, tier 3 cities, people who do not necessarily have access to high-end gaming gear, but they still want to enjoy, they still want to be a part of this whole social generation who want to spend time with each other online and play games together. This is where I think, you know, the road diverges into two parts. On one hand, we have people like Rajat who are pushing the envelope every now and then. They are introducing new technologies. They are trying to introduce AR, VR, even AI into gaming, and they're trying to add more new technology, disrupt the industry like that. And on the other hand, we have a stark contrast where people in tier 2 and tier 3 cities do not have a decent enough gaming setup to be able to enjoy these games. These guys, rely more on their mobile. I mean, everyone has, I'm assuming most of the people over here might have played PUBG. And one of the reasons why it was very successful in India is because it's a mobile game and not everyone has access to a computer or a PlayStation or something like that. Of course, with the whole anti-China sentiment, PUBG did get banned, but it was very quickly replaced by other mobile games like Call of Duty and Free Fire and whatnot. So this is like a very stark difference. People who want to keep on pushing the industry standards and try to get more technology involved, and then there are people who just cannot afford to do that because the audience demands games which is more accessible, which is more inclusive rather than staying exclusive to the PlayStations and the VR technologies. So what do you think about that?
I think India is a very nascent market. If you see that way, we are only a 3 to 4 year old mobile gaming market. And if you look at the Western markets, right, so they've gone through that phase from PC to console to mobile over years, as compared to India, where we've all been exposed to gaming for the first time since Jio has happened. So a lot of India has 300 million gamers at this point, and majority of which have seen gaming for the first time in their lives in the past 2 years. And not only gaming, they've been exposed to a lot of social apps for the first time. At Lumika, we call these guys so digital natives. So they've been exposed to video for the first time, exposed to audio for the first time, messaging for the first time, gaming for the first time. So they have like a bunch of entertainment options they have at their disposal, right? Because of the cheap data rates, better smartphones, frictionless payments, and all of those macro factors. So for them, I think they need something which is very frictionless for those gamers, and they need something which is very light, which is very social, which has their multiplayer connection. So for them, they're looking for those kind of experiences, and those are the new gamers, right? But India also has that category of gamers which has grown up playing some of the best Western style of games, grown up playing Assassin's Creed, grown up playing Witcher, grown up playing CS:GO, Dota. So that audience demands something else. They demand better quality, better game design, better game experiences. So it's completely different, right? So India, I mean, with so many different states, so many different cultures, we have that breadth and depth in the market to make multiple games in multiple genres, be it RNG, be it fantasy, be it hardcore PC console games, or be it mid-core games, or be it like very casual snackable games. So we have that depth and breadth to make those multiple games, and to be honest, all of them can succeed and all of them can do really well, because it just depends on your focus as a game developer, as an entrepreneur, who you're looking to target, right? Who your target audience is your audience something which typically uses a mobile phone in a tier 2 tier 3 town, or is he like a hardcore gamer, who's used to playing like a PS4 or a game on PC?
Okay. I'm so glad that you mentioned this because you spoke about the casual audiences and the hardcore audiences. At this point, I'd just like to take 2 minutes to just talk about my experience in this industry as well and what my company does. AFK Gaming is a media focused company. And when we say media, we focus mostly on esports. Uh, Esports is when you leave the casual gamers behind and you try to push as much skill into the game as possible. Uh, to the extent where people have to train, they have to train day in day out as hard as Olympic athletes to be as good as you can at the game. And a lot of people don't find it believable that people need to put in 8-10 hours just to practice a game on a daily basis. I think at this point, even Kshitij can tell us how his audience has been distributed. Like, there might be several users on his platform who play every day, but then even his company might have that one core piece of audience that puts in so many hours on their website and their games that they become so good at the game. That's what happens. There's always that 1% of gamers who want to be the best, and that's what my company used to focus on. At least that's what esports used to focus on. So AFK Gaming at this point is more like, we have many verticals. One of the verticals is our website, which happens to be a news and media portal. We bring all the latest updates about the games and what all is going on in the gaming industry. We like to publish articles about it and keep people updated. And there's the other side of our company as well, our B2B side, where we create whitelisted content for a lot of game developers and tournament organizers. So yeah, organizing gaming tournaments itself is a completely different vertical, which I will get into later. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that there's so many different aspects into gaming. Like Sadiq, you mentioned, there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of breadth, and all across the table there's enough meat that everyone gets to be a part of the industry and everyone gets to feed their families basis of video games, which wasn't really considered possible a decade ago. If you told someone that I want to be in the gaming industry, they'll be like, get out of here, get a real job or something like that. But now we know that these are very much real jobs. So that being said, I do want to move ahead, and I want to talk about how viable it is to have a career in gaming. There's several different avenues that you can enter, but Rajat, I would want to start with you. Could you please walk us through how viable it is to have a career in gaming, and what options are available to kids these days? Let's say someone starting off who has just passed their 10th or 12th exam. What options does he have?
Okay, interesting. So as I told you, I've been in this business for 25 years now. So that says it's definitely viable. Never ever considered changing it. Stuck around, forever. Always had fun. Still having fun, and will continue to have fun. So I don't want to put, the other, materialistic stuff with this. But yes, most of the game developers I personally know, I'm part of the game developer supercar club, because I'm a car freak, and at the same time, I'm a game. So you can just probably go there and look at how materialistically this industry is so viable. Of course, there's ruthlessness involved. I keep selling this myth that game development is fun, but let me tell you a fact: it's like pregnancy.
It's very
it's
tedious.
very very daunting. It's very tedious. It's daunting, and especially the kind of games we make. It takes like 1.5 to 2 years in making, and making the same game for 2 years is kind of, it's frustration sometime and all that. But end result is always awesome. When the game comes out, you start seeing people playing and all those things, and the numbers, in our business, numbers start coming immediately. Because acquisition is largely people like you, who are playing and who are streaming our games and all that. Right now, we have more than 90 streams of our game in last 10 days. 8 days actually. So which is actually pretty impressive numbers for us. So that is there. The second part of the question is, you know, the career options. Especially people who are in 10th and 12th, they need to figure out what they prefer. Do they like telling the stories? Do we have interest in figuring out how to, how the things? So for me, the initial thing was when I saw the car movie, in Atari. When I started playing on my ZX 2600, and I could not believe that I was controlling that car, because TV was always kind of a unidirectional thing, right? We used to consume. But here I was sitting with some controller in my hand and making that car move was at some other level thing. And I that itself, I kind of figured out that I'm going to move that car, on my own leave, and so in a way, I was like focusing on the programming side thing, and AI was my forte for a long time till I was, programming for others, so you need to figure out whether you are a storyteller, you are an artist, and you start brushing your skills today. Thankfully, so much content is online. You go on YouTube, search Unity. There are like hundreds of thousands of people are so lucky. That there's so much content out there for you to actually learn. And I see, in fact, we start interning kids from sixth standard in our office.
Sixth?
So sixth standard, yes.
Wow.
They come
Okay.
to our studio, they learn the process, they come and see how the games are actually developed, and we encourage that. So every year we take 8 to 10 kids, and this is one of the things which we think is very important for people to understand what goes behind these things, and because you can always keep on playing PUBG and you can keep on playing other, but Fortnite, especially in urban areas, like, but going in the studio and figuring out how the ballistics are working, what is the AI, how does it work, how the multiplayer network is working, and for us also it's kind of an interesting thing because we get to know their perspective, which is always very, very, in your face, which is very important. So from 10th and 12th, you figure out what you want to go in, focus. A lot of kids reach out to me all the time, and I pretty much answer all these questions about like where they should be going for, after 12. Should they study in India? Should they study outside? All those kind of things. But you need to figure out what you need to do. As I told you, there are more than 200, especially for, MBA and people who are, driven by numbers and all those things. Analytics, amazing, and I think it's kind of a backbone for most of the mobile games we do. We also did one mobile game on Chota Bheem called Tofu Dhamaka, and we had roughly around 5.5 million downloads for that. And it was kind of, Mortal Kombat Tekken kind of a game, but again it's mobile and kiddish thing. But for us, the way we actually drove the traffic and everything was by actually hiring some MBA interns and making them sit on. I figured out it was more like stock exchange kind of thing where you're constantly create number and taking quick decisions based on those kind of things, unlike the console and PC games doing, which was kind of learning for us. So we always learn. Open to learning is another thing which and I, as Sadiq mentioned, right, there is a huge potential for mobile and PC both. So and like storytelling, like you can always be a Panchtantra or Hitopadesh kind of guy, who's been reading those kind of things. If you know how to actually put those things in a different perspective for global audience, why not? When God of War can be made with Greek or Norse mythology, why not Indian mythology have that kind of place and this thing?
Yeah.
So people from hinterland and also people for like good artists, they can always find. So they should just prepare, they should figure out what they want to do, what they think they are, or spend some time with people, be open, shameless, while sharing your stuff also. That's something what I encourage a lot. When you have an idea, just discuss. I hate the word stealth mode. It takes you nowhere. Be open, be discuss, keep discussing your ideas with people, especially in the industry people. When game industry conferences happen, people go there. I see a lot of kids there, esports especially. My eyes like were wide open when I was in Fractal Arena in 2013, because I always used to watch Twitch and I used to believe in it. I played professional sports myself at GameStop for charity, not for like this thing. So we used to have a group in GameStop and used to play in our Redwood City, this thing, and we used to raise some money and used to donate. And Jonathan Wendell is a good friend who plays professional, a quack in, tournaments and stuff, makes millions out of it. So even if you're a gamer, forget about a game developer and all those things. Even if you're a gamer, you can actually make millions. Like a lot of people we know, personally, they do those kind of things. So I saw esports for the first time there in Oracle, and I was like completely, I couldn't believe, it was like the entire rage was just unbelievable. People were like screaming, shouting their favorite team. It was like watching cricket in, in India.
In
It was
stadium.
like that, and that was quite kind of an eye opener for me. And yeah, in stadium, yeah, in Oracle Arena where there's, Golden Warriors team plays basketball. So and it was full. So
Hmm. Yeah.
imagine, even you can be a commentator. That's such a big difference. A game commentary. So you figure
Yeah.
out what you need to do and just work towards
Yeah,
it. There's so
that's
much available now.
basically my job description. So commentary is a part of it's one of the tasks I
Absolutely.
do at AFK Gaming, and that basically my job is to basically entertain the audience. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in one game at any given time, and not everyone will be able to understand what's going on. So my job is to paint a storyline good enough so that the people can understand what's happening in the game and they can be entertained. Plus, at the same time, I try to, break down the moves that they are making and why they are so good at the game so that I can cater to the curious side of the gamers as well, and satisfy their inner nerds and teach a little bit about how to become better at the game. But then the passionate response that you gave, Rajat, you said that you guys start young. You guys start recruiting people at the in sixth standard, and that's basically a huge a different demographic that will obviously be more passionate about games. So the way you were fascinated when you could first control a car, that's the kind of excitement that a child would have. But on a completely different on a completely different side, I would like to pose a couple of questions to Kshitij right now, because we are addressing a group of MBA students. There's a huge difference in perception of gaming when you ask a kid and when you ask a college going kid. The perspectives are very different. So Kshitij,
Totally.
my next question is for you. When you try to either recruit someone into your company, or maybe let's say go up for a round of investment or something like that, what is the most interesting part about your job that could probably attract the attention of a young college going kid? Or what would make that kid think that this is a very lucrative career option, or if this is even viable?
Sure. See, why is it lucrative? I would like to answer it in a very crisp way. As we've already mentioned in this discussion, right? Indian gaming industry as such is in a very, very nascent stage.
Hmm.
And with companies in the gaming sector like Nazara, your Dream 11, MPL, a lot of others who are doing really, really well in the country, going in and attracting a lot of investments, that means that they are creating a huge market out there, right? So this obviously spills over to the rest of the gaming industry as well, which creates ample opportunities for somebody who's wanting to get into gaming, either to work or be an entrepreneur in the gaming sector, whatever it is, right? It creates an ample opportunity for them to see how they can contribute to the growth of a company, how they can start a company and see those 100,000 users, a million users, or 10 million users coming in. So there are a lot of different things that you can learn. I mean, see, probably you might not even want to be in the gaming sector after a couple of years. So, I mean, it's always a possibility that people might move to different other things. Like I myself moved from aerospace to gaming, which is starkly opposite, right? So, but the things that you can learn in a very, very fast growing sector like gaming, you will be exposed to a lot of different things that will help you drive similar or better roles in companies that are of different industries as well. So when you look at gaming, look at it as a career option that is going to take you to the next step that you want to do, right? Because you need to define your own path as to what is that you're looking for when you're applying for a job. I mean, this story is completely different for people who want to take the entrepreneurial journey. But if you're clearly looking for a job, define what you want to do, and just approach a company. And probably the best way to approach them is to pick a problem that they have and tell them how you can help make it better. I mean, it's probably that simple.
Okay.
And yeah, you've got to be just shameless about approaching the right people. That's about it.
The right people. That's that's important over here. You said that if you want to go for a job, go for the right people, and don't beat around the bush. Get straight to the point. But what if someone wants to go towards the entrepreneurial side of things? Sadiq, I would like to pose this question for you. If I, as a recent graduate, want to open my own gaming company, what should I be looking at? What stats should I be looking to pump up if I want to attract more investors? Obviously, some stats like how many users do I have, how many downloads do I have? Those are some of the key stats that are available. What else do people look for? What else do investors look for when they are trying to look for the perfect unicorn gaming startup?
Right. So, I mean, that's a pretty, that's a pretty detailed answer. But in short, I mean, there are roughly 4 or 5 things we look for in our gaming companies and our gaming founders as they traverse their entrepreneurial journey. I think the first thing is if you understand the demographics of your target users. We really admire founders who have a comprehensive understanding of the target users, the size of that audience in those markets, their cultural norms and features, the spending appetite of those users, and if something you're building it will create like a deeper community around them. So basically resonating with your target audience and getting that initial feedback right in the initial days will help you create that deep, loyal, and a lifelong user base. So I think first thing would be understanding the demographic of your target users. Second thing is basically understanding what you're trying to build, right? Understanding the gaming genre you're trying to get into. While it plays a big role in your game design, game development, it goes extremely helpful, goes a long way and helps you build your initial user funnel. So basically understanding your retention metrics, your monetization models. So having an understanding, doing like a deep research on them, especially if you're very early on in your entrepreneurial journey, and obviously it's a huge plus if you have extensive experience building games in a particular genre. So that's one thing we look at. And roughly, I think what we look for is vision and the passion, right? If you have the vision to create games that can exceed user expectations, that can delight and surprise an Indian user or a global user, if you have that vision, if you have that mindset to be like the next Supercell or the next Roblox, so that kind of vision is what we seek for and what we look for. I think it really starts off by having that mindset to create high quality experiences, deliver those new experiences to your fans, to your users. And I think more importantly, defining that vision of your game, of your platform, of your studio, until you're crystal clear that what's working, what isn't working. Um, in a gaming business, sometimes you get it right the first time, most of the times you don't. So having those capabilities to iterate, to innovate till you find that perfect game for your user. So that's the kind of mindset, that's the kind of vision we are looking for in our founders and in that business in particular. And I think having the right founding team to execute on that vision is also very, very important. So you should have a co-founding team or co-founders who have complementary, you can say, skill sets, because in your initial user journey, you can't really go out and hire like hundreds of people. It really depends on those 4, 5, 10 people, and you really need to count on them. So having the right founding team in place, and I think lastly, will the venture money get you the escape velocity, right? So I mean, there are so many, like I mentioned, the market has enough depth and breadth to accommodate 500 to 1000 gaming companies, and not everyone can be funded, not everyone can have the money. So will that venture money get you that escape velocity? Will you go from say 1 to 100 in 2 years with that venture money? So I think that's something which is very important. Achieving that venture scale is something we look for also. So and obviously, like, a lot of these things won't be in place, especially early on in your journey. That's why you approach like-minded investors, people who understand gaming, people who understand the nuances of gaming businesses, gaming platforms, who help you in a journey, to help you get the right talent, to help you make use of the right capital, right use of the capital. So that's typically, in a nutshell, what we look for in, you can say, gaming businesses.
Okay. To sum up everything that so far that I've gathered in this discussion so far, judging from all your inputs, I would place if the gamer is in the center, game developers are a major part of what drives the industry, and on top of that, there are support and auxiliary industries. Support and auxiliary companies, something like what we do at AFK Gaming, who aid in the content that these game developers can push out, that we can use to enhance the experience of the gamers. And to back it all up, we have investment companies who try to help people find their right audiences, and more than that, fund the right people who have the right vision. So if for all the people watching over here, if that's something uh, I can use to sum up the entire discussion, uh, I would draw a diagram something like that. We have game developers on one side, we have support industries on the other, and the game himself obviously in the center. At this point, since we are about to start wrapping up the session, I would just like to throw the floor open to the panel. If any of you want to add any more thoughts or have any more things to say, please go ahead and add some inputs. Anyone? Kshitij, Mr. Rajat, Mr. Sadiq, anyone? Not really. All right.
Sure. So I think to close it off, I think like it's a very, very exciting, booming industry. Really great industry to get into, because like other industries, gaming is a sector which is pandemic proof.
Yep.
And we are seeing like a lot of games getting into gaming, a lot of mobile users coming up. So I think it's a great industry to be in, to be a part of in any capacity, be it on investing, be it in developing, be it an entrepreneur, being just taking up, you can say, an IT role in a gaming company. And it's the best time because we are in that golden age of gaming, and we are going to see a lot of emerging high quality gaming companies coming up. So, so we are in the right place at the right time.
Right place at the right time. Yeah, I think that basically sums up everything. It's such a privilege to be a part of this golden era of gaming. At this point, I would just like to throw it back to our anchors, Rishabh and Tanvi. You guys can take over. If there are any questions that anyone might have, please, you're welcome.
Thank you, dear panelists and our moderator, for such an insightful discussion. I'm sure the students learned a lot from the splendid panel of dignitaries. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would request the Director, Sir, Dr. Abhijit Chirpotkar, Deputy Director, Dr. Giri Hallur, Sir, and our faculty mentor, Dr. Tripti Dote, to please come up for a picture with the guests.
As all of them join, I think as the mentor, I would like to, I feel that this digital gaming is really going to come up. With a surge in digital, I think gaming market is going to come up. And I want to thank all the panelists, especially personally from my side. Mr. Rajat Ojha, Kshitij, Sadiq, and of course, Umesh, you were such a delight. Thank you so much and for rescuing us. And I really wish a speedy recovery to Siddharth. I hope he gets back soon. He bounces back soon. And it was an amazing discussion. I think with popular genres like puzzles and adventure and all these coming up, the future of gaming is only going to grow from here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. It was a pleasure, being here for you guys. Are there any questions that any of the students might have?
We
would
will
love to answer them.
The Q&A session, but they're
Okay,
waiting for a photograph, I guess. So all the we need a photograph with all the panelists so that we can keep it for record. Yeah, I think Sir is here.
Tripti ma'am, I think we should request Mr. Sadiq to turn his video on.
Please, can we have the cameras on, please? I would request all the speakers to please switch on the cameras.
My video is on, right?
Okay. I think Rishabh and Tanvi, can you please take a call on this and just check out if all the speakers
Yes, ma'am.
panelists are
Yes, ma'am.
there?
Yes, ma'am. We're taking.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. The picture has been taken.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you once again, all the panelists. I
Thank you.
think we have the Q&A round now.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, panelists. That was a very insightful and very informative session. We got to know a lot of things that we were not aware of. So let's move on to the Q&A. We have received a lot of questions from the audience, and we tried our best to select those questions that seemed most relevant to this discussion. So let us begin. And the first question I see is about competitive potential of the gaming industry. And it's from Dikshant Singh. Dikshant, kindly go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
You can.
Yeah, a very good morning to all the panelists here. So my question is, as we know that big gaming developers like Ubisoft, EA, and Rockstar have already made a foothold in the Indian gaming market. So do you think will Indian gaming companies will ever be able to stand toe to toe with these gaming giants?
I can see a sly smile on Rajat's face. I think he has a response. Go for it.
Yeah, I think game industry is basically, a leisure industry, entertainment industry, and good enough place for everyone to survive. Rockstar has just the art support team basically here. Of course, EA does something. They're not like, I don't see any competition per se. I'm not I'm not that competitive or something. As I told you that I'm actually expressing my creativity with my game, right? And it's like you painting, I'm painting, and both are going, and there are enough fires for our kind of creation in the world. So I generally don't see it as the competition. In fact, I would say it's an enabler for them. Having them in the country is actually legitimize the, validates the existence of the Indian potential and Indian industry in general. So I would say it's a big thumbs up. A lot of people reached out to us after, because there is a lot of cross exchange of knowledge, information, which we generally do with Ubisoft people largely, because they have been very, very open. Their previous managing director, in fact, Syed, who's recently been appointed, is also a good friend. So we discussed a lot of things and stuff. So I think it's an absolute enabler. It's, validates the country's, potential. The resources, are much better, because when you see a lot of people like those coming to India and setting up shop, that means there are enough resources being developed. There are enough resources being turned by all the institutes and all those things to put them there. So I think there is, I think it's a great thing that they exist, and for the business side, absolutely no competition. Anyways, we are not here to be the biggest, or probably bigger than Ubisoft or bigger than EA. If it happens, great. Nobody is, starting a business to do that. We starting because we love and we do things, and we want to, like, as we say, it's a viable business for us. Eventually, in the long run, if that happens, which happened with a lot of other studios, especially in the West, it's absolutely more than welcome. But I think it's a great thing that they exist here. We missed Gameloft, which actually exited the country some time back, and in a very bad way. But all in all, it's always good to have them.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Moving on to the next question, we have Rishi Raj Roy with a very fundamental question about the industry as a whole. Rishi Raj, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes. So, good morning to all the panelists. So, my question is, when it's come to gaming, according to me, esports is the most lucrative part. And right now in India, like esports ecosystem is not very mature enough, like, when compared to China or North American region. So, very few publishers are here presence in India. Also, like, there is currently no single training academy in India for the esports also. So to create the ecosystem or the presence of the the whole esports locality and all, so where the huge investment should be made on, like how to be that to future proof, like make that future proof.
There's a small part of this answer that, the small part of this question that I would like to answer, but because your question mainly pertains to investment, maybe Satik has something to offer. After he's made his statements, I'll add something to it.
Sure. I mean, esports is essentially like any other sport. It has some players, which are like athletes in other sport. You play a competitive sport, which is a game in this case, and there's a source of entertainment for viewers, for spectators. So that's what esports essentially is. In this case, I mean, the player is the gamer. The game can be Counter-Strike, Fortnite, Dota, PUBG, and the viewer, someone who's watching on, say, instead of Star Sports, he's watching on Twitch, YouTube Gaming, Huya, DoYu, etc. So I think broadly, I think if you see, esports is very misunderstood from gaming. There's a lot of misunderstanding with what constitutes esports versus what constitutes online gaming. But I think in general, esports is, like you mentioned, right, it's a very nascent industry in globally, not only in the world. I think it's a $1 billion industry, and I think it's only 5 to 10% of that money comes from India, right? So it's very, very nascent. There are, I think, for one to build like an esports venture, there are some key stakeholders which one needs to understand, and how much value can be extracted from those stakeholders. So there are the IP holders of games and esports, ones like Riot, Activision. Then there are distributors, right, who help you watch those esports like YouTube, Twitch, etc. And then there are teams, or brands like Team Liquid, OG, FaZe Clan, all of these guys who are like league owners, either billionaires or media companies, right? So I think revenue, if you see for an esports venture, accrues to majority of these stakeholders, and only a smaller fraction of the overall revenues goes to like these teams, or goes to like an enabler for the IP holder. And maintaining and organizing those teams is very, very expensive, and not everyone is, you can say, can become like a top team, right, in esports. So it's very hard to extract value when there's like a massive IP holder which controls all the value levers. So I think for esports companies, it's you need to like find the right fit, the right proposition to get to the right scale. I think there are various opportunities in this space. You can start helping out the IP holders, which I mentioned earlier. Try reaching out to the new generation of competitive but fun-seeking casual gamers who currently have nowhere, um, like 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 snack ones who play esports as snackable entertainment on a more casual audience, right? Who just watch and just who just want the fun to play and watch. You can be involved with those players, with those tournament organizers for esports. You can work alongside gaming companies to generate values from both players as well as viewers. So there are companies which are built around media broadcasting rights. There are companies which are built around merchandise, right? Like 100 Thieves, FaZe Clan have done that, and there are various companies which are involved in like content creation, content aggregation. There are various companies which have basically leveraged game streamers, gaming influencer as well. So in fact, the top 10, I think out of the top 10 PUBG streamers in India, majority of them are hailing from India. So there are multiple opportunities in the space. The space is still nascent, and monetization is yet to be completely unlocked. But yeah, I mean, it's a very fast growing space and something everyone's keeping a close track on.
Yeah. adding to what Sadiq said, he did a really good job of explaining that there are several different types of companies, especially companies that revolve around merchandising and content creation. Because let's be honest, hosting a team of 5 people, putting them together in one place so that they can practice, train, and become better, it's expensive, and not everyone can afford to do so. In fact, let's say even if you do manage to create the best team in the world who wins each and every tournament that exists, the prize money itself will never be enough to pay off the expenses that are incurred in the support of such a team. And that's why a lot of these teams, especially teams like Liquid, FaZe, the bigger ones, these names have done a pretty good job of not only building one of the best teams but also building their brands. They have built up enough of a fan base that they can then go around and tell people, listen, I have a good enough fan following. Your name would look really well on my jersey. Then they can go out to other brands and approach for sponsorships, and basically that's how they unlock their revenue. Of course, that doesn't mean that all of them are making profits this year. There are several gaming organizations which are still yet to break even. But then, because it's an industry, because it's a sort of business which requires such a high level of investment, and there's not a lot of ways to earn that money back, a lot of these teams have to now rely on their merchandising and their content to basically turn their players into something more than just players. You have to turn them into superstars. You have to turn them into someone who people will go crazy over the moment they walk into a venue. I mean, the whole COVID situation has kind of ruined the esports experience to some extent. I mean, of course, there's one side which says that everyone is at home playing games, and that's why COVID has been great for gaming. I personally miss those tournaments. I miss the days when I used to walk into an event and everyone's screaming their ears off, and it's such a euphoric experience to be around. And it's something that you have to experience. I hope that, I don't know, someday post COVID people are able to enjoy that yet again. But until that happens, there's just one thing that you need to keep in mind. These teams, these training facilities, they do exist in India. There's several teams currently, like the Aces RG Academy. Even Optic India tried to come in here for in 2018 to host a CSGO team. At this point, Fnatic, we have 100 teams looking. Not 100 thieves. We have Fnatic, who are already in the country. We have Vitality, who has just entered the country with a bunch of content creators. They're probably looking to pick up a team somewhere in the near future. No spoiler alerts. I'm not going to give that to you. If you want the spoiler alerts, go head over to aftgaming.com. Shameless plug right there, but apologize for that. So yeah, a lot of these teams have to rely on building themselves up as a fan brand rather than just building themselves up as a business. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I got the answer. Thank you so much.
Since we're running out of time, we head towards the last question, which is from Swastika Singh. Swastika, please go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, panelists. Am I audible?
Yes, Swastika.
So, as we are aware that augmented reality imitates artificial things in a real environment, whereas VR creates an artificial environment to inhabit it. And in augmented reality, 3D graphics are used to superimpose the computer-generated images over the user's view of the real world. So my question to you is, how do you think AR and VR will impact the concept of thematic gaming?
Isn't it already happening? So AR in whatever nascent way.
Those are some interesting questions, and thank you, panelists, for answering all of them so patiently. This has enlightened all of us with ideas and a different outlook towards the gaming industry.